Hello Bushnell students, welcome to week 7. Only one more week to go. This week we have a number of learning objectives from chapters 10 and 11. In week 7 we look at the topics like quality, Six Sigma thinking, inventory management, that sort of thing. Our learning objectives this week include reviewing the Six Sigma philosophy, understanding the concept of TQM or total quality management, and knowing the different dimensions of a typical quality operation. There's a number of elements we're going to learn about. We're also going to be explaining the various purposes of keeping inventory. So we're going to pivot from quality over to inventory. And we're going to be looking at understanding the inventory models. There's fixed order quantity and fixed time period and that sort of thing. And then take a peek at some inventory costs as well. In chapter 10, there's a number of quality efforts that are discussed. Now, if you've worked in manufacturing at all for any length of time, you've heard of the term Six Sigma. In very simple terms, the Six Sigma quality model comes from it's a statistical term. Hard to say that fast 5 times. So I'm not going to go into any great details here, but check out the required PowerPoint. It's the PowerPoint in the required section. Where I go through an example and walk you through understanding Six Sigma. At this point, it's important for you to know this. That Six Sigma is a quality goal that targets no more than 4 bad parts per 1 million parts or pieces made. Right? So out of 1 million Ford cars produced, if you will, 1 million Ford trucks, only 4 could have any defects. Out of 1 million Boeing airline jets made, only 4 could have bad parts, right? Nearly unimaginable. Again, though, it's a goal that you aim for. Watch the PowerPoint video and to give you a little more in-depth explanation of that. The idea of TQM, or total quality management, came on the scene in the late 1980s, early 90s, at least in the automotive supplier world, in the automotive world. Now, I remember it because the company I was at hired a TQM expert. That was his role. We changed our mission statement. We changed the terms that we used every day. We changed the language and culture of the company. TQM changed companies from the inside out and how they viewed quality. Where I worked at the time, we went through a culture shift as we rolled out TQM thinking. Today, probably it's ingrained, okay, so you wouldn't have noticed the change today, but back then it was a big deal. One of the biggest changes I remember is this notion of cost of quality, or COQ. The textbook talks about this concept. The whole idea that quality was costing us something fascinated me. You know, as a young engineer at the time, I didn't think in those terms, and I didn't think, and I had to adjust how I viewed my job, quite frankly. So there's a great table. Check it out in, I think it's exhibit 10.4. In the text, it talks about the COQ structure. TQM and cost of quality led into a whole new industry of systems quality standards and thinking. And these standards included QS 9000, ISO 9000, and other specifications. Automotive car companies demanded that their suppliers, like one of the suppliers that I worked for, be certified in QS 9000 or other quality standards. So there's this whole new certification industry that emerged in the mid-90s. Companies like ours had to train all of its employees on these new standards, conduct internal audits, and develop action plans where there were gaps. Personally, I became an internal auditor and I was responsible for driving QS certification at one of the plants I worked. It was a great learning experience. But more than anything, I observed people taking quality seriously and working to do much better at it. QS certification for us was important. The automotive manufacturer, the car companies, told all of its suppliers that they were not going to source business to suppliers who were not QS certified. So we were significantly motivated. The progression of TQM, Six Sigma, ISO 9000 all drove quality improvements across the United States over the last 30 plus years now. These programs are now ingrained in the thinking, like I said earlier, of most operations managers. They do it, they don't even know the background of it anymore because It's what we do now. At this point in your career, it's important to conceptually grasp these concepts and start using them in your own organization. I know this chapter 10 is only about, it's a few pages long. It's 40 some pages or so. But there's a lot of vital concepts for you to know and some history that's important to know as well. Make sure you read this chapter in detail and maybe even do some extra reading on it too. I included some extra reading material in the attend section. Okay, so from chapter 11, we're going to talk about inventory and managing inventory. A good basic definition of inventory from this chapter is it's stock of any item or resource that's used in the organization. This definition is broad enough to cover almost any company. For example, at McDonald's and their operation, buns, hamburger patties, soft drinks, those are inventory. In the staffing world where I work, I would consider employees as our inventory. We don't treat them as inventory, but we see them that way. And if our inventory gets low, we need to find more people. So, it doesn't diminish their status as human beings. They're all loved by God and created by God. But, in our primary service, putting people to work in meaningful jobs is important. So our process, we manage people and we treat people or see people a little bit like inventory. Think about the business that you're in for a moment. What is your inventory? If you work for a mortgage company, your inventory may be mortgages held. If you're a bank, it might be money. If you're in real estate, your inventory is available, homes on the market, and that sort of thing. I think you get the point. So consider what is your inventory unit. In fact, I think one of the questions we asked this week is around that concept of, what is inventory in your company? Okay, so check out also the section on inventory costs. There's 4 different cost dimensions of managing inventory. And these are not to be taken lightly. And by ignoring these inventory costs, you could really ruin your business. Remember, they're costs. These are not revenue generators. They're costs, holding costs, setup costs, ordering costs, shortage costs, that sort of thing. All right. So week 7 is busy. There's a discussion question and an assignment with 4 questions to answer. And your final project is due as well. So a note about the 4 assigned questions this week. You'll notice instead of a math assignment, I've given you a narrative question, some narrative questions to answer. Quantitative problems like math are important, but I want to make sure you understand the qualitative side of quality and inventory, especially as it relates to business and operations management. So as a reminder, the final paper is due this week. I included some thoughts on this in the complete section of week 7, so make sure you check that out. And a reminder for week 8 that each of you will be doing individually doing an online presentation with me, just one-on-one. This is intended to be low pressure, low anxiety. Don't be anxious about this presentation. If you want to begin preparation now, I've included a template in this week's additional material section that you're welcome to use. You don't need to use that template if you don't want to. It's just a way to get started. Make sure, though, that you are following the guidelines for this presentation as it's talked about on the syllabus, and there'll be a little bit more about that in week 8's discussion as well. All right, that's it for now. Please be sure to read all of chapters 10 and 11, and please be sure to watch this week's devotional and catch all the required and attend videos. And remember, God is on his throne. He's always been there, and he always will be. Don't start coasting yet, by the way, to the finish line. We got one more week to go after this. Have a great week.